meeting. Go.
Mark one.
You're ready.
The impact of the Depression on my life was twofold. I was 20 years old, just turned 20 in October of 1929. That's the date when the Depression started. That's in the history books. Okay. I was working my way through college. I had spent 2 years at UCLA. And when the Depression hit, I had to ask myself, what am I studying for? What's going to happen to what my personal views are about myself? I was concerned about my family. Since my family had far from been rich, I think for us the Depression had been going on for a number of years already. My parents couldn't support me. I was going to college with the help of an older sister who was very generous in funding me as much as she could. She was a bank employee. She joined with the rest of my family in wanting to have one college graduate among us, and I was in that role. Okay. I had always thought I would like to go out and explore the world as an archaeologist or paleontologist or something which, as the Depression wore on, it became very clear that was esoteric and made no sense, because there was a second impact on me, and that was that the social order that we had grown up in, that my family was used to, and all the neighbors and all the country had crumbled, and what was going to happen from here on. And I felt each of us had a role to play in helping to restructure our society. That was a very strong feeling in me, and it gave me a certain direction in my life. And that was a path I took that led me into many struggles.
You had mentioned to me also that how it affected your family, that your family lost their home and your father, and you had, it actually was a very sad story. They said you felt that your father may have, that he died of a broken heart after.
Yes, my father and mother had a small business. My mother worked with him. He wasn't a good businessman to begin with. She was better at it. And when economic times were better and they had more customers, they would sell new furniture. During the Depression, that switched to used furniture. It brought very little income. When they had purchased our home, which was near Central Avenue and Jefferson Boulevard, in those days, blue-collar worker area, which was already becoming mixed black and white. And they had to have not only a first mortgage, but a second mortgage. That amounted to $2,000. When the Depression hit and people stopped buying from my parents' store, there was no money to pay that mortgage. So after a couple of years, they made the last payment that they could. The mortgage of $2,000, the second mortgage, was held by a woman who pleaded with them to not default on it, that she would have to lose the property anyway, because she didn't have the $2,000 either, but there was nothing they could do, and so our home was gone. My father was nearing his 60s and becoming ill. He had a very hard life. And I had been as the years wore on, I was in Los Angeles towards the end of 1934. I decided at that time to leave Los Angeles and go to New York, where there was a lot of social activity going on that I wanted to be part of. So I said goodbye to my parents and left. And the following year, my father died. And I always felt that he had been defeated by the Depression and that the loss of our home was the last straw for him.
Tell me about when you
Mark
first
two.
heard about the epic movement in Upton Sinclair. Was it exciting for you when you heard about it? What did it mean to you?
When I heard about that Upton Sinclair was going to run for governor on a campaign.
I have to check on time code.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Speak.
Because we're remembering when you first heard about Epic and Upton Sinclair running for governor.
It was like a revelation, the thought of ending poverty in California had certainly never occurred to me. And I thought, this is something I want to help bring about. And so I got into the campaign at the very first opportunity.
Okay, and can you tell me this one more time, but saying that what the campaign was? Saying that when you first heard about Epic, or when you first heard about Upton Sinclair, it was like a revelation.
You want me to start with
Yeah,
that?
when you started getting it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was like a revelation to me to hear that Upton Sinclair was going to run for governor. His platform would be end poverty in California. And I felt this is someplace where I could fit in and play a role in ending poverty. We needed a voice. We needed somebody who would rally the people. And he did present a program. And I didn't bother to think, is it something that could be enacted or not? It's something that we should fight for, that we should put up a struggle for. Because the economy had gone down so completely, it was not serving the needs of the American people, and certainly not of the people in California. And even closer to home, it wasn't serving me or my friends or my family. And so I decided this is something I'm going to be a part of.
Great. Can you tell me, do you remember at all what his platform was, what any of the major points would have been?
Well, the most important to me was that jobs would be created by using the empty factories and the farms that were no longer viable, and put people to work on them. And the money they earned would then go into circulation and revive the economy. Those were the two major points that I remember, and it seemed reasonable to me. I was believing in socialism. I had come to that belief because I thought it was reasonable that production should be for use and not for profit.
Okay, very good. You met Sinclair. And,
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about your impressions of him, the man? Kind of what he appeared to you as a person, and then how he appeared to you also as a candidate.
Before the Epic campaign started, to me, Upton Sinclair was a great fighter for civil liberties. He had played that role in Southern California. It's written in the history books. And he had been under attack constantly as a socialist and as a very outspoken person. As an individual, I thought of him as an ascetic person. I had been in social situations where food was served. He was very careful about what he ate. I think he was largely vegetarian. Nowadays, we speak of that approach as eating health foods, And he was kind of a cool person. I never thought of him as a rabble-rouser or somebody who would stand in front of crowds and wave a banner. But in effect, that's the role he did play once the Epic campaign started.
And did you hear him speak in public? Was he able to, with that kind of manner, was he able to draw a crowd? Was he able to keep people's attention?
Well, the interesting thing was, even though I always felt he was a cool person with whom you might expect to have a conversation on the basis of reasoning, that he attracted enormous crowds and wild cheers and a real devotion from those crowds because they believed everything he said. They believed it. And when he said the economy could be started again and how he would go about starting it.
Do you remember being in any of those meetings? What the
Yes.
atmosphere? Tell me about it.
Yes, I was in a number of those meetings. Some of them were with students. Of course, with students, they were smaller.
Sorry, just one moment. Here you go. Okay, bring me back in the 1934 Epic meeting. What was it like?
To go to an Epic meeting was really very exciting because there were enormous crowds and all kinds of people. And one of the things that I hadn't expected was to see how many older people were there. Now, they were like everyone else, looking for something better. And of course, in those days, older people had no safety net. So they were there. I wondered, what is it this man has who's really a very cool personality that's bringing these people out? And the only thing, it seemed to me, that answered that was his message, End Poverty in California. And that's what I wanted, and that's why I went. And I went to a great many of these meetings. Some of them were student meetings, and he spoke at some of those. And at some of those student meetings, a lot of us who were students carried the meeting, and with great enthusiasm because we believed in the program.
I mean, were there more people? Can you was it like a situation? There were people all around you. Were there did it feel like every place you looked there was crowds of people around, or was?
Those of us in the Epic campaign, whether we were young and inexperienced or older and seasoned in politics, felt that he was going to win because there was so much enthusiasm. There was so much people wanting to believe, and all kinds of people. They were not the people that I've ever seen before or after in a political campaign. A lot of them would ordinarily have been passive people, but people were suffering. And they thought this was the way out, and they came.
Okay, great. At the meetings, do you remember, was there music? Was there was it more like a serious political meeting, or was it more of a celebration? Do you remember the sense?
Well, I remembered more as rallies because the times were very tense then. Upton Sinclair was running for governor in a time when the social system had broken down. And the attempts to uphold it were being done by vigilantes, American legionnaires, police, and there was always fear that the National Guard would be called in and violence would be provoked. And so, no, the atmosphere was not one of partying or celebration such as you might get in political gatherings now. No, it was very serious.
Okay, so can you tell me just the very ending of it, without referring to what it's like today, just saying that the atmosphere was very serious?
The atmosphere was very, very serious.
Okay. Do you think that, can you tell me some of the other activities that you were involved in for EPIC? Did you do leafleting? Did you sell newspapers? Did you?
I was editor of Student EPIC, and I was part of an organization of students that existed on 9 campuses in Southern California. And my activities were through that group, mainly. And we were mainly either young socialists who belonged to the Student League for Industrial Democracy or young people from the Protestant churches.
Now, we always hear about Sinclair that one of the main reasons, one of the big problems was that he had alienated the churches, that the churches were against him. But there was church support?
Yes, there was. An interesting thing about Southern California history is that there always, to my knowledge, has been a strain of Christian socialism. And that showed itself in the Sinclair campaign. Those church people came out.
Can you tell me, is there any story that you can tell me about somebody you met during campaigning, or something that strikes you as being a memorable experience during the EPIC campaign?
Let me see. To me, the most interesting thing about that campaign was that it drew in so many people who wanted to change society, and in some very different ways, like nobody else wanted, but they did come together. Now, there was a strong utopian strain in Southern California. In fact, there had been a utopian society, and some of those people were in the Sinclair movement. There had been a technology organization, and they were in that movement. Then there were the people who had left Iowa and other Middle Western states and had come to live out a more peaceful old age in what they thought would be a warmer climate. A lot of them were centered in Long Beach, where Dr. Francis Townsend had organized the Townsend movement. They participated in the campaign. And in addition to that, we had the Direct End Poverty in California clubs.
Okay, great. Please stop for a second. That's one. Okay, if you could tell me very briefly about the fact that you were worked with Sinclair on the ACLU and you were the student representative of the ACLU.
There were two of us who were student representatives on the Los Angeles board of the ACLU. The other person was Al Hamilton.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you to start again by saying that you knew Sinclair personally because you were one of the student representatives.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I knew Upton Sinclair personally. I was one of two student representatives.
Instead of starting with yes, just start with I.
Yeah. Oh, so. I was one of two students on the board of the Los Angeles ACLU. The other person was Al Hamilton. And the two of us attended all the board meetings and took part in the various activities. And there were many activities because of the tense atmosphere in Southern California, which prevailed for many reasons, but one of them was the role of the Los Angeles Times. And there were many struggles around civil liberties issues. And there was...
Yeah, can you tell me that you met Sinclair because of this?
Some of the times that I met Sinclair was not necessarily at meetings, but at his home. He and his wife would entertain us. And once in a while would bring in a speaker who was traveling through the area. And some of the people who came were not all board members, but other people. And so in that way, I had a wonderful opportunity to meet some of the great people from around Southern California who had the same aims. And mostly, we were all socialist in our thinking.
So you had an opportunity to both know Upton Sinclair personally as well as experience him as a political leader.
I have a picture of the board of the ACLU of Los Angeles, and Upton Sinclair is in that. And then I had my camera one time at a picnic, which was held in Van Nuys, incidentally. That was rural then, and there was a picnic grove.
I'm actually going to stop right now just because we're going to show the picture, so we don't need to describe it. So you can say that if you could just tell me just that you were at, because of the ACLU, you were at events with Sinclair and knew him that way.
I was at a number of events with Upton Sinclair. And that's how I knew him, because I had already in high school been involved in some of these activities.
Okay, great, good. Do you remember any of the anti-Sinclair materials, the LA Times, the billboards, the literature? Were you?
Well, the main thing, type of propaganda against Sinclair was, I would divide it into two categories. One was that he was an agent of Russia. He was a communist, someone who would overthrow the system in the United States, that his politics were absolutely crazy. He was dishonest, coming out as a Democrat when everybody knew he had stood for the Socialist Party. And that he was leading a revolutionary movement that would completely turn the United States topsy-turvy. That was reflected in the Los Angeles Times and in leaflets that we got around Southern California, and in speakers who were speaking at anti-Sinclair campaigns, speaking for the man who became Governor Merriam.
What did you think about that?
Well, of course, to me, it was a bunch of lies, and he was nothing like that. He was actually, in his social philosophy, a very gentle person, I would have said, that things should take their course in sort of an evolutionary way, and that if the people who believed as he did would sort of play the role of preachers, that this is the way society could be improved.
Did it make you angry? Were you frustrated by seeing all of this? Did it make you want to do more? I mean, how did you react to it?
Well, I never reacted fearfully to any of the anti-Sinclair campaigns. This was an old story to me in the United States. It had happened before.
Yeah, very. That was a struggle to make that film too. We ready?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to the Sinclair campaign.
I'm looking that way.
You're looking at me.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were, I just asked you, did you ever feel like there was a low point during the campaign?
For me, there was never a low point in the Sinclair campaign. I was on a high the whole time, and everybody who I knew in it was on a high. And we were convinced we were going to win. We felt sure he was going to be the next governor and that he would end poverty in California. And that was something that was very, very exciting.
Do you remember election night? What you felt when you found out that he was losing? Was that a shock to you?
Well, the people that I was involved with most closely were mostly the young people. We were sure that the election had been stolen from him.
I'm sorry.
We were sure that
yeah. I'm talking while you're talking. Start again.
On election night, I was with other young people who had worked in the campaign, the students, and we were sure that he was going to win when the count was all in. And when the count came in and he had lost, we couldn't believe it, we couldn't accept it, and for years, everybody I knew who had been in that game believed that the election had been stolen.
Okay, I'm going to actually ask you to start one more time. And when you're saying he, can you say Sinclair instead of he? And don't refer to the future. Just stay in the past. Don't say for years afterwards. You have to remember what you remembered at that moment.
Okay.
Okay. So back to election night.
On election night, I was with a group of other young people who had worked in the campaign, and we sat there waiting for the results, feeling sure that Upton Sinclair had won and that he would be the next governor and end poverty in California. And we just couldn't believe that there had been an honest count. We felt that the election had been stolen.
Okay, great. Did you feel that before the election night, when you thought that Sinclair would win, did you feel that there would be a change in your life afterwards? You know, the idea that he could end poverty. Did you feel like it would be election night and then there'd be like a new world, or do you remember what you felt?
The thing I felt that if Sinclair were to win, that there would be a lot of opportunity for the ordinary people of this country, and that would help Southern California especially turn around.
Okay, great. Do you remember, I just want to go back to one point that we talked about earlier about being on the ACLU board, because there was another little camera problem at that point. Can you tell me again very simply that you were the student representative on the ACLU board with Upton Sinclair?
Mhm.
Okay.
Do you want me to mention the other student?
You can, not really. You can say you were with another, one of two
Yeah,
student representatives.
I was one of 2 student representatives on the ACLU board of Los Angeles, and so was Upton. Upton Sinclair was on that board.
Okay,
And
start
so
again.
I was one of 2 students on the board of the ACLU of Los Angeles. Upton Sinclair was a member of that board.
Great. Okay. Do you put yourself in for a moment in the shoes of the people who are in the anti-Sinclair forces? Did they have reason to be afraid of Upton Sinclair and Epic? If you were on that side, would you have felt or acted the way they did?
The people who were opposing the Upton Sinclair campaign were people who wanted to continue the political hold they had on California, Southern California, and Los Angeles especially.
Do you think their fears were justified that their control would be gone?
I think their fears were entirely unjustified. I thought then, and I think now, that they were simply interested in retaining control of the whole political system of California, which enabled tremendous corporate growth, both in agriculture and industry and the development of land and all the rest of it.
Do you remember the fake newsreels that were shown in the theaters? Did you ever see them at the time?
I don't remember any of the fake newsreels that were shown. I'm sure, I know that they were there.
Okay, that's okay. And let me take one more question, and go back to actually in the very beginning when we were talking. When I asked you about how the Depression affected you personally, you gave a nice long answer, but you also had not always looking at me. Can you tell me a very short answer and look at me and tell me how the Depression affected you personally?
The Depression affected me personally in 2 ways. It made me question my future. Here I was going to college. Would I even have a job when I got through? And then my family was suffering. And of course that affected me greatly. My parents lost our home.
Okay, can we stop for a second? Okay, just back again, when you talked about one of the points in the Depression that you didn't know what your future would be like. Can you repeat that, because there was horns in the background? Okay.
The Depression made me think, what would my future be? Because I was a student. I was preparing to go out into the world and earn a living. And it seemed as if there was no way of going out into the world to earn a living, go out into the world to be unemployed and scrounging.
Okay, that's fine. Good. Did you go to the movies at that time? Do you remember what did the movies mean to you in the 30s?
The movies in the 30s were really a great escape. Everybody that I knew loved the movies, and we went to all kinds of movies and enjoyed every bit.
Do you remember any titles in particular of kind of big escape films that you liked?
Well,
Anything
I
stand
don't
out?
really, because in order to do that, I'd have to know the dates.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, great. I think that we're done.